The rain poured like grief from the heavens that morning, relentless, cold, and unforgiving. On the corner of a cracked city street, a young woman named Aisha stood beneath a flickering streetlight, her thin coat soaked through, her trembling hands clutching a small paper bag that contained all she had left, a piece of stale bread, and a letter she couldn't bear to read again. Life had been cruel lately, taking more than it ever gave. Her dreams were fading, her spirit breaking. She had lost her job 2 months ago, her apartment soon after, and now, even the people she once called friends avoided her calls. She was invisible to the world. But that day, in the middle of her silence, soaked in rain, kindness would find her in a way she never expected. If you believe that even one small act of kindness can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this one. Sometimes, the smallest light can pierce the darkest night. Aisha had once been full of life, a young teacher who loved her students, who stayed after school to help the weakest ones catch up. She used to believe in goodness, in fairness, in the idea that if you did right by others, life would be kind in return. But reality doesn't always mirror the stories we tell ourselves. When her mother fell sick, Aisha poured all her savings into hospital bills, working extra hours to keep up with the cost. But when the school downsized due to budget cuts, she was one of the first to lose her job. Her mother passed away weeks later, leaving behind a hollow apartment and unpaid medical bills that swallowed her entire world. For months, Aisha tried to survive. She sold her belongings one by one, first the TV, then her jewelry, and finally her mother's old sewing machine. Each sale felt like losing a piece of herself. She slept on benches, bathed in public restrooms, and lived off small acts of generosity from strangers. But as the days turned into weeks, those acts became rare. People stopped looking her in the eye. The world moved on, and Aisha became just another forgotten face in the crowd. It was on a gray Tuesday morning when she wandered into a small cafe just to escape the cold. She didn't have money, but the smell of fresh coffee was too much to resist. She stood by the door, hoping for warmth, when a deep voice startled her. The cafe owner, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a thick beard, looked up from the counter. His name was Horace. "You can sit," he said quietly, without judgment. Aisha hesitated but nodded and took a corner seat. Moments later, he placed a cup of coffee and a sandwich on her table. "Eat," he said simply, and went back to wiping the counter. Aisha stared at the food, unsure how to react. She wanted to refuse, to tell him she couldn't pay, but the hunger in her stomach overpowered her pride. Tears filled her eyes as she took the first bite. She whispered a thank you, but Horace just nodded from afar, pretending not to hear. That small act, a sandwich, a cup of coffee, a moment of dignity, became the start of something far greater. Over the next few weeks, Aisha returned to that cafe often. Sometimes she helped clean tables in return for a meal. Sometimes Horace slipped a few coins into her hand without saying a word. He never asked about her past, and she never volunteered it. There was something sacred about that silence, a kind of respect that went beyond pity. Slowly, the light in Aisha's eyes began to return. One evening, as the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, Horace handed her a small envelope. "Take this," he said. Inside was a key and a note with an address. "It's a spare room above the cafe. It's not much, but it's warm." Aisha couldn't speak. She wanted to refuse, to tell him he'd already done too much. But her voice failed her. She simply nodded, tears spilling freely. That night, she slept in a real bed for the first time in months. The mattress was thin, the blankets old, but to her, it felt like heaven. Days turned into weeks, and Aisha began helping out in the cafe full-time. She washed dishes, served tables, and slowly learned how to run the register. The customers liked her, her gentle smile, her quiet politeness, her way of remembering every regular's favorite order. The cafe began to thrive again, and Horace, though reserved, watched with quiet pride. But kindness, true kindness, is never one-sided. It ripples outward, touching others in ways unseen. One cold night, as Aisha was closing up, she noticed a boy, no older than 10, sitting outside on the curb, shivering. He looked hungry and lost, just like she had once been. Without hesitation, she brought him inside, offered him soup, and wrapped him in her scarf. The boy said his name was Saad, and he'd run away from a foster home. His voice trembled as he told her he just wanted to find his little sister, who'd been sent to another family. Aisha saw herself in that boy, the same fear, the same loneliness. She decided to help him, even though she had little to give. Over the next few days, she helped him contact local authorities and searched through community centers until they found where his sister had been placed. Haris, seeing her determination, used his cafe connections to reach out to a social worker he knew. Within a week, Saad and his sister were reunited. When the siblings left, Saad hugged Aisha tightly and whispered, "You're like my angel." It was in that moment that she realized, kindness had come full circle. Months passed, and the cafe became more than just a place to eat. It became a small haven for people in need. Haris and Aisha quietly began leaving food out late at night for the homeless who passed by. They started a "Pay It Forward" board, where customers could buy meals in advance for those who couldn't afford them. At first, only a few participated. But soon, the entire community joined in. Each sticky note on that board carried a message, for someone who needs a little hope. Then one morning, everything changed. Haris fell ill. A mild cough turned into something serious, and he was hospitalized. Aisha stayed by his side, taking care of him as best she could. He was a proud man and rarely spoke of his pain, but one night, as rain tapped against the hospital window, he reached for her hand. "You've given this place more life than I ever did," he whispered. "Promise me you'll keep it going." Aisha nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise," she said softly. When Haris passed away a week later, the cafe was silent for days. The air was heavy with grief. But on the morning of his funeral, when Aisha unlocked the door, she found something extraordinary: dozens of people waiting outside. Former customers, neighbors, even strangers. They came holding flowers, letters, and envelopes of money to help keep the cafe open. Each person told a story, how Haris or Aisha had shown them kindness when they needed it most. One woman said she'd been battling depression until a note from the Pay It Forward board gave her courage to keep living. An old man revealed he'd been sleeping in his car until Haris gave him free meals every night. A group of teenagers said they'd been inspired to start volunteering at shelters because of the cafe's example. Aisha stood there, overwhelmed, realizing that Haris's kindness, once silent, small, and unseen, had spread like wildfire. It had changed lives, including hers. She decided to rename the cafe the Silent Power. Not just in his memory, but as a reminder that real kindness doesn't need to shout. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply acts, quietly, humbly, and yet it transforms everything it touches. Years passed. The cafe grew, becoming a beacon of compassion in the city. People came from far away, not for the coffee, but for the feeling they found there: warmth, acceptance, humanity. Aisha never sought fame or praise. She just kept doing what Haris had done for her, helping others, one cup, one meal, one soul at a time. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the city lights flickered on, Aisha sat by the window watching the world outside. She saw a young woman standing by the door, soaked, lost, and hungry, just as she once had been. Aisha smiled, walked over, and quietly placed a warm cup of coffee in her hands. "Come in," she said softly. "You're safe here." And in that simple act, the circle of kindness continued. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it to spread the message that kindness still exists, and it's stronger than hate, stronger than pain, stronger than silence. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of the goodness still left in this world. Speech balloon special request. In the comments, write, "Kindness lives on," if you believe one small act can change someone's entire world. Because in the end, it's not grand gestures or loud promises that change lives, it's the silent power of kindness, quietly moving through one heart at a time.